Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Reverend George Coates, President of the CFNA for Western North Carolina Conference. Reverend Dr. Mark King is with me, our conference treasurer. Before getting into the report, I'd like to talk about a few points of inspiration that took place during this past year. In the midst of a pandemic, we witnessed a lot of strength in our connection. From the Office of Treasurer, information about and how we could obtain PPP loans, information from our cabinet, from the bishop, from the chancellor on the phases of the pandemic that we needed to deal with to care for employees and volunteers. Funds to help churches meet clergy payroll expenses, information from the Board of Pension and Health Benefits, from the foundation. The Methodist Foundation made grants that funded ministry in a lot of different areas. Church development helped develop Zoom accounts and technology grants so that we could continue ministry regardless of what was going on in our country. Resourcing between the cabinet, conference staff, and ministry teams, leadership development, missional engagement, justice and reconciliation. When you consider the finances of the conference, we have witnessed what is possible when we use our resources collectively for the benefit of all churches, the annual conference, and the kingdom of God. As you consider the CFNA report for the annual conference, imagine the possibilities of what we will be able to do together in 2022. The CFNA report will be given Saturday, June 12th during the virtual annual conference. The full report is in the program and reports booklet and in the supplement. The CFNA report has two parts. First is the policy statement, which is updated for 2022. Second part is the CFNA report is the proposed 2022 budget. From this point on, I'd like to turn it over to our conference treasurer, Reverend Dr. Mark King.
Thank you, George, and thank you for your leadership that you brought to us this past year in CFNA and to the annual conference. Thank you also for taking the time, as George said, to watch this and familiarize yourself with the CFNA report. Part 2 does include the 2022 proposed budget. 2020, as George has alluded, was indeed a challenging year for all of our churches and for the annual conference. We didn't know how we would end up when we were concluding 2020, but the churches came through. You were so faithful in your generosity. In fact, the 2020 apportionment receipts were only down about 5% from 2019. And the spending freeze that CFNA put in place last year produced great fruit in that we had additional funds left over that we were able to use for ministry and mission grants. Over 80% of our churches paid 100% of their apportionments in this most struggling year. But in spite of all of that, trying to put together a 2022 budget in this environment was indeed a challenge. But we feel good about the budget that we're bringing to you today. The conference portion of our 2022 budget is $8,734,105. Now, that is a less than 1% increase on the conference portion of the 2021 budget. The total 2022 conference and general church budget is $14,815,288. This is an increase of about 7.77% over the 2021 budget. I really want to ask you to please read our report, for in it, it describes what we were dealing with in relation to the general church portion of the 2022 budget. We originally had sought to bring an entire conference and general church budget of less than 1%. But as you may be aware, the Judicial Council early this year dictated that we had to use a different set of numbers for the 2022 budget over the ones for general church in 2021. So this, therefore, does put the majority of the increase with the general church side. And we always remind our churches that we are a pass-through conference. We will send to the general church what the churches send to us for that portion of the budget. Now, what's included in the conference portion of this budget? Again, there is no medical leave supplement in this year's budget. That cost is being borne by the Conference Board of Pensions and Health Benefits, and we thank them for that. There are equitable compensation grants, which helps our churches that are unable to pay the required minimum salaries to help them get to a point where they may be able to do that. There's the district support, which is the portion of the budget that supplements and supports our district superintendents and their staff in their work in the conference. There's the conference support and the mission and ministry parts of the budget, and I want to go into just a little bit more detail of what those are involved. First of all, the conference support has three portions to it. There is you will find those in our report under Schedule 1. First, there is conference services. And this has about a 2.5% increase, primarily because, as we all hope the General Conference will meet in 2022, we need to cover some of our delegate expenses related to that. Then there's the conference staff support. Now, this has a less than 1% increase to cover anticipated increased costs in that area. Finally, in the conference support budget, there is the conference administrative services. And it has about a 1.65% increase, primarily to cover increases in our technology costs, as well as costs in other areas such as legal and support. So we pass those along, we put those at a 1.65% for that area. Then Schedule 2 has the mission and ministry budget. And this is where our various teams do their work across the conference. There is a 2% increase in their budget. However, it was not put into place with the particular team areas for 2022. Rather, it was set aside so that new initiatives, new ministry strategies might come forth from the work of the connectional table and all the teams coming together. The district apportionments will add a collective $2.2 million to this total budget, but bear in mind the district apportionments do not change from their 2021 amounts. I like to say this word. When you look at a percentage of the conference expenses across our annual conference, we look at the expenses that are submitted from the year-end report. Compared to the total spending of our churches in the year 2020, which is the last year we have this data, the expenses of the general conference and district apportionment takes only 9% of those expenses. That means churches are left with 91% of their budgets to be used for where they are in their local ministry and their local settings. Now, if you also take the total giving of our churches, again as reported in 2020, the general conference and district apportionment budget consumes only 8% of those total gifts. That means that churches are able to use 92% of their gifts, again, in their local area. I'm going to turn it back over to George as he will share with us some concluding thoughts.
Thank you, Mark, for going through all that information for us. And again, we encourage you to look at the report. Thank you for taking the time to view this video. And we look forward to our formally presenting this report to the annual conference via the virtual annual conference on June 12th.